Welcome back to PSC Tech Byte. This week I want to talk with you about how you can leverage the Microsoft Excel APIs which are available in Microsoft Graph. In fact, to the Graph, you can play with Excel workbooks that you store in OneDrive for Business or in SharePoint Online libraries. In order to do that, you should create a session with a workbook so that you can decide if you want to persist your changes or if you want to just use a per session instance of your Excel workbook, and so your changes will not be persisted into the real document stored in OneDrive and SharePoint Online. In order to use the Excel APIs with Microsoft Graph, you need to have the files read and write permission, and you need to use a work or school delegated account, delegated token. You cannot use an application only or a personal account token. And what you can do with the Excel APIs in Microsoft Graph is, for example, working with workbooks, worksheets, the tables, ranges, named items, and charts. So it is a really powerful API that you can use for your own custom business solutions based on Excel content and graphs. So let me show you how you can play with it with a real demo using the Graph Explorer. So this is the entry point in the Microsoft Graph API reference for the Excel APIs. And as you can see, it is under the Workbooks and Charts section. As you can see here, you have a list of the available options, how you can create a session, how you can authorize and stuff like that. So first of all, let me show you an Excel workbook that I have in a SharePoint Online site. And if I open this Excel workbook, you can see we have a set of named items like value A, B, and C. And value C is based on the A plus B formula. As well as we have some fake data, some random fake data, and a chart based on that data. So we will play with this Excel spreadsheet using the Microsoft Graph. So here we are in the Graph Explorer, and first of all, we can get a reference to the folder that is containing our documents. So let me use this URL. So I will provide the SharePoint Online tenant to the site API. I will provide the site ID and the web ID, and I will access the root folder of the drive in that site collection. So by running this GET request, I will get a reference to my SharePoint Online libraries, and specifically to the shared documents library, which is the root of my site collection. Of course, I can get all of the files in this library, in this document library, having access to the children endpoint of the root of my drive in that set collection. And as you can see here, I have access to my sample file, which will be the target of my request. And of course, I can get the file that I want to access by ID, and this is my file, and this is the ID of my file in OneDrive for Business or through the Files API. Now I can create a session, a workbook, Excel workbook section, simply by targeting the ID of my site collection, then the drive and the collection of items, and the ID, the unique ID of the item, which represents my document in the target document library. And then I can say /workbook to access the Excel APIs in Graph, and create session, /create session. This will create, making a post request, a new session which can be persistent or not persistent, and I can make my choice simply providing a request body, which will be a JSON request, and providing the persist changes false or true. If it is false, of course, it will be a non-persistent session. So let me do that right now. And I will get back a JSON response which will include a workbook session ID. So let me copy this ID in a safe place so that I will be able to reuse it later on. For example, we can use this workbook session ID in order to read the content of a named item, like for example the value A that we had in our spreadsheet. So I can simply say document. So this is the base URL of my document item in OneDrive for Business through the Files API. workbook/names / the name of my named item, which is value A, for example. I get the range and I select the values for that range. By doing that and providing in the request headers an header called workbook-session-id and providing the value of the session ID that I just got from the API, I can make a GET request and have access to the content of my cell in the Excel workbook. And as you can see, we get 1500 as the value of our cell. We can also set the value of a range. So we can do, for example, a patch request. And through a patch request, we need to provide the new value for our range. So, for example, rather than having a select of the values, we can simply say that we want to patch the range. And in the JSON body, we will simply provide the value for our range. So we come here, and in the JSON request, we say that, for example, the value is 3000, just for the sake of providing a different value. If I do that, still providing the workbook session ID in the request headers, I will be able to update the value of my target named item, as you can see right here. So that if I, just for the sake of doing that, make another request for that value, we can see that now it's 3000. And if we request the value of value C, now it will be updated based on the new value of my value A cell. So as you can see, we can play with the worksheet, we can play with values in named items, and we can update in our own non-persistent session in this sample the values of our items in the Excel spreadsheets. We can even do more. If you remember, in our sample Excel file, we also have a chart. So we can get a reference to a chart, and in order to do that, we can just make a GET request, still providing in the HTTP headers the workbook session ID. And again, I target my item, so my Excel workbook, and then I say workbook API, worksheets, give me the worksheets that I want to access, which will be the fake data one. Is, if you remember, if I open the Excel document, you can see that we have a fake data worksheet, and in there we have a chart, and I access the chart named chart2, which is the chart that I have in my Excel workbook. If I do that, I will get back the properties of my chart. But the really interesting part of this story is that you can even get the image of your chart as a binary image file simply by providing the /image endpoint at the end of the URL of your chart. And by doing that and making a GET request, still providing the header with the workbook session ID, you will get back a base64 encoded image of the chart. And it is so true that if we open a new browser tab right here, let's say that we want to open about blank, and we want to see the content of that image, by using F12, we can change the content of the body, and simply playing with an image with a base64 content, we can do something like that. So in my body, I will simply add an MG HTML element, and I will provide as the content of my image the base64 encoding of my chart. And by doing that, as you can see, here is the chart that we just got through the Microsoft Graph using the Excel APIs. It is really, really powerful in my opinion. As usual, thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.